Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology. This is a space where we seek to create and cultivate healthy conversations between those things we geek out on and the philosophical and theological questions that often arise out of our fandoms. Like, what does it mean to be human? What makes a hero? What makes a villain? How do the stories and narratives we geek out on shape how we live in the world? We are your priest to the geeks. We aren't all ordained, but we see ourselves as mediators at the intersection of geek culture and going deeper in our faith. We don't always have to agree, but we do respect each other, and we see everyone as a beloved child of God. Everyone geeks out on something, so come geek out with us and enjoy the show.
You're listening to an Anazal Ministries podcast. How do we see the lines between war, politics, piracy, religion, and trade or finance? Well, guys, we have a very special episode for you today as we are doing our primarily political series where we've been going through talking about the politics in our favorite fandoms, thinking about them from a Christian lens kind of deal. It's been a lot of fun. The last 8 weeks, we've been doing an extra episode every week to talk about politics in our fandoms. We're going to keep doing episodes like this. They'll just be a lot more sporadic, but this will be the end of our 8-week long voyage of episodes. This was a lot of fun. It still is a lot of fun. We're going to have a great time today talking about Pirates of the Caribbean and the East India Trading Company with me, your host, Joshua Noel. And you know what? I decided it's a shame that this is one of the only times we talk about Pirates of the Caribbean. I was like, they can't only have a Josh with bad opinions. They have to have a good Josh. So I brought on Josh Patterson from Rethinking Faith. Josh, thank you for joining us, man. It's good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I don't know how great of opinions I'll have, but I'll have some.
Well, hey, before we get into anything else, I saw you were drinking something there. What you drinking today?
So I'm kicking it simple, dude. I poured myself a nice tall Modelo.
Ooh.
Especial. Yeah.
All right, nice.
It's a good light beer, just getting home from work. And
Yeah. I went before we recorded. We had a hell of a time trying to figure out when to record this, but I went and grabbed my it's Legal Remedy Brewing Company, and they have the Prenup Peanut Butter Stout. And I love it. It's so good. And if you're wondering, like, why are these guys talking about beer? Well, we're also going to talk about a little bit of theology and hopefully prepare you for Theology Beer Camp 2024 in Denver, Colorado, where we'll both be there. I'll be there representing Systematic Geekology and the Whole Church podcast. Josh will be there with his podcast, Rethinking Faith. And I guess it's confusing when I talk about Josh because I could be talking about myself in third person, but y'all get it. Y'all get it. Come on. So if you guys want to show up, you can get a discount by using either our code Geekshire, all one word, GEEKSHIRE, or by using Josh's code, which is
Rethinking Baggins. Again, all one word.
Yeah. And use either of those codes, get a discount, meet us at Theology Beer Camp. I might bring some Legal Remedy beers with me. I might share one with you. So, show up.
Ooh.
And if not, I usually have rum. I don't know if it's allowed, but Tripp didn't say anything last year. I feel like it's fine.
I think alcohol is accepted. Theology Beer Camp is an open and affirming space. So alcohol varieties are all welcome.
Yeah.
And non-alcohol varieties. So.
Yeah. They actually have a meeting happening at the camp. So if you don't drink,
they do.
And even if you have problems with that kind of thing, there's help and ways for you to come and enjoy yourself and maintain sobriety if you want, or knock back a few with us, talk pirates, whatever you want to do. We'll be there. It's going to be a good time. Josh, one thing we've been doing in these episodes that I really enjoy, we've been highlighting a bad actor in politics, and then uplifting at the end a good actor. So we're going to start by highlighting who we think is a bad actor in politics. Could be from the Bible, could be, history, or just a random made up character in a fandom. I'm going to go with, I can't remember his first name, but I'm going to go with the teacher in the Stokes trial, specifically because this is one I was thinking about. I know a lot of Christians might not love it because, evolution, whatever, different people have different thoughts on this. Both of us, from my recollection, I'd be really surprised if you were a creationist. Both of us are evolutionists to my knowledge.
Yeah, you are correct.
Yeah. But in the Stokes trial, why I thought it was so important is because the teacher didn't even know if he taught evolution. He said, I might have taught evolution. And the whole point was he intentionally got a case to happen in his state because his state outlawed teaching evolution. And in our own times, we have a lot of stuff, especially I'm looking at Florida and California, where people are outlawing people teaching certain things. And I just like the idea that sometimes the little man is the good political. Oh, wait, I'm supposed to be doing bad political actors. Sorry, guys. Well, let's talk about the president that went against him and tried to stop free speech of teachers. There we go. That's the bad actor. I don't know his name, but it was someone who once ran for president who was acting against him in this trial and lost, thankfully. Josh, who's the bad actor for you in politics? And hopefully you have a better time than I did.
Well, I had to think about this because I wanted to do something maybe fun and a little bit different. So I picked one of my favorite movies overall, which is The Lion King. And Scar is a pretty not great political person, right? Scar kills the king and lies about it, right? Frames the king's son, Simba, tells Simba, kind of gaslights Simba into thinking that he killed his father. He takes over the Pride Lands. He ruins the circle of life. He becomes selfish and, just eats all the food for himself. And then the land becomes, destitute and catches on fire. And even he has hyenas marching like Nazis, which isn't great, lots of bad stuff. So I'm going to go with Scar as a bad political actor.
Also, I just realized that if for some reason I was teaching politics or civil education at elementary school, you could compare and contrast Scar and Mufasa by talking about communism and socialism. There's a difference.
You could.
Yeah, that's a
you could,
man. That's a good one. Anyway, not to do a Lion King episode because I love Lion King, but today we're actually going to be talking about some good old fashioned pirates, and I'm excited to jump into this one. Guys, you might notice I forgot to do the banners for this if you're on YouTube, but I still have the slides. We'll still have some fun pictures of pirates and Pirates of the Caribbean stuff going on while we're talking here. And if you're not on YouTube, ignore all that, I guess. I don't know. Either way, you guys can either like and subscribe or go over to Podchaser and leave a rating review. That'd be cool. I forgot to shout out Austin Nance for supporting the show. You're cool, man. But on to pirates. First, I want to get to just kind of our own personal relationship with pirates, pirate history, or just specifically this movies, if you want. Josh, what's your history like when it comes to pirates? Have you always been into pirates, or do you just like the movies?
So yeah, a bit of both. I am quite a fan of Pirates of the Caribbean. I had, actually last night, my wife and I watched Curse of the Black Pearl, just in preparation to get into spirit. And she gets annoyed with me because I can basically sit there and quote the whole movie line for line, which is a gift of mine, I guess, if you want to call it that. And she finds it rather annoying. So, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think I feel like I've liked pirates as far as I can remember. I remember going on these pirate boat things as a kid where they dressed you up as a pirate and it was a pirate ship and you're sailing around in a harbor somewhere, and then there's a bad guy pirate that attacks the boat and you spray him with water cannons, and then you go get the buried treasure. And then I learned at nighttime they turn these kids' boats into adult party boats. That's bring your own grog, and so you just come in and party on a pirate ship.
I've never actually tried grog. I feel like that's something I need to do. But maybe that's something I'll do at Theology Beer Camp.
Yeah, I haven't had specifically grog either, but it's a good stand-in for an alcoholic beverage, so yeah, I'll take it.
Man.
Yeah. So
yeah, we actually talked about grog, mojitos, and rum in general, and the history of it on Drinks with Tejas episode over on YouTube. So if you guys are over there,
Oh, nice.
check that out. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I've always loved pirates as far back as I remember. I was fascinated with the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disney World as a kid. You know, I grew up in Florida, so we went there a lot. Even remember in school, they kind of like they did field trips to, you know, when you live in Florida, they do just field trips to like Disney and stuff. And they actually taught us about pirates using the ride and different stuff that's like the clothing and different stuff that was there, that some of it changed since then because, you know, the ride changed a lot. But that's neither here nor there. I remember always loving that. I remember one of the first books I read was Being Treasure Island. It's not the first, but it's one of the first I remember. So I loved that story. But I think really when it solidified for me was with these movies, because I loved these movies. And then One Piece. One Piece is awesome. I love the anime. Then in college, actually, I took American history, and the professor, I thought that he made a mistake. I was like, he just doesn't know what he's saying here. He starts his like final paper. He's like, hey, 10 pages, anything you want, as long as it's about history in America. And he gave us a timeline. And I went, I bet I can find pirates. So I went and did this like deep dive into pirates, thinking I'm going to make an easy paper. And then it turned out to be really difficult to pare it down to 10 pages. Because I did like 10 pages on Blackbeard, 10 pages on Stede Bonnet, 10 pages on, like I had this huge, like basically a book. And I was like, it turns out I actually love this subject. And I one of the things I really appreciated that I got out of that research that I think we're going to talk about a lot throughout this episode actually has to do with who the pirates really were. Were they these people who, you know, before Pirates of the Caribbean are depicted as just nasty, evil, bad guys who jump on ships? Or are they, you know, the fun-loving, you know, freedom people in Pirates of the Caribbean or something else? And one of the things that one of the things that I find really fascinating was how when you do the research, a lot of the pirates were people like women who've been, you know, demoralized or whose husbands left and were tried for whatever. So they're criminal because they're married. So they're trying to run away. And where's the best place to run away in the 1800s? The sea. Or people that the country specifically hired to attack other countries as privateers, who then when the country was like, we're at peace with them now. So now you're a pirate and you're an outlaw, you know, like, or slaves. A lot of slaves were pirates because, hey, it's either be a slave or join this pirate ship. And it's one of those things where there's that line in the Pirates of the Caribbean movie, and we're going to talk about this a lot, I think, of maybe sometimes piracy itself can be the right action. And that's one where I'm looking at this going, man, some of these women, I'm with them, man. Yeah. Screw the law. Let's go pirate some stuff. Yeah, go ahead. I kind of just your take on that line. I know I'm just going on rants. Sorry, I get excited with piracy, so this isn't going to be as structured as some episodes, but yeah, what are just some
it's all good.
thoughts?
I mean, you have a more solid background than I do in this, you know, the historical side of things. I mean, like I said, I love Pirates of the Caribbean. I grew up as a kid loving it. I recently, like a couple years ago, I went to the Outer Banks with my wife, and so Blackbeard, that's kind of some of his stomping grounds. So I think when you take the ferry, I think it takes you to Ocracoke Island or something like that. And apparently he like died there or something. I don't know. Maybe you know better than I do. But there's a brewery there that's like kind of named after him. This is pretty sweet. So I enjoyed that. Does that sound historically accurate, or am I mixing up my pirates?
I think that's right. There's so many like Blackbeard himself has so much like actual history and lore mixed in together that it's like,
sure,
sometimes it's hard to remember what actually happened. You know, like what was like, because there's like part of his story was like he was beheaded and then proceeded to jump in the ocean and swim 10 laps around the boat or something. And I'm like, I somehow I don't think that part happened.
Right. Maybe that's embellished.
Possible. I'm not sure, but it could be a little bit exaggerated. Oh man.
Yeah, but I mean, I do love, as kind of you hinted at, there is this weird line with pirates where it's like, okay, are the things that they do, is it always bad? Are they always evil? Or is it maybe kind of like a Robin Hood situation? I mean, they probably do less of the steal from the rich and give to the poor. They more or less just steal.
Take what you can, get nothing back.
Yeah, there we go. Exactly. And it's interesting. But I mean, I like this subversive aspect of it. I kind of have a rebellious spirit. And so that's always fun with the pirates. But also I mean, you know, at least within the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, they have the code, right? The Pirates Code, which is weird. This, you know, still some kind of set of rules or guidelines that this, you know, seemingly group of, you know, wild and crazy free people still stick to. So there's a lot of nuance to it.
Yeah, I've wrestled with doing like a series of shorts specifically on like that part of pirate lore of like the pirate code and how it came to be. Because there were like, sorry. So as someone who, I don't know if you know, I'm like thinking about joining law school. I've always been fascinated with law in the last couple of years. Because I know one thing you don't really learn in law school that I'm interested in studying, so I've just been studying on my own time, is like the origins of law itself. Like, how did law come to be in human structures? Which is fascinating because a lot of it is through religion. So
yeah.
But like, what's really interesting is like you can kind of get like a micro study when you look at piracy, because you see these people leaving government, and either they die very, very quickly because they just left the government, they're on their own in the sea, and other ships are bigger than theirs. Or a lot of the ships actually started taking on their own code. So it wasn't like a code for all pirates, but there was like this code of, hey, don't drive drunk because then they'll catch you. You know, like, so like they all have like, they're like, and they would write these codes down like, hey, we don't do this. And I think it was Bartholomew Roberts, if I'm thinking right. He had killed the most of any pirate. And he just had this giant raid. He like raided a slave ship, came away with all this stuff. And mind you, like there's two sides of this coin of, yes, it was evil. He burned down a slave ship with slaves still in it. Like the level of evil is like, we romanticize piracy, even myself, but there's like, yeah, no, they were still evil. Like a lot of them, not all of them.
Significantly evil, yeah.
Yeah, but that was like a super evil action. And what was interesting was, he said, oh, we could do away with the code this one time. And he's the one where most people get the idea of the pirate's code was from him. And I hope it's Bartholomew Roberts. I hope I'm not getting the wrong pirate. I might be. Sorry, guys. But what was interesting, though, is like, he's like, oh, this one time we'll make a splurge, because he was so excited about his most recent raid. He was so successful and everybody was drunk. And then all of a sudden, an armada starts catching up with them and no one's able to drive. I just think it's so funny that like his downfall was drunk driving. Like, oh man,
yeah, that's pretty good.
yeah. Don't drink and drive.
One time he ditches his code. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh man, yeah. But so talk about the pirate part. I wasn't planning on doing this, but I think this is actually gonna be really interesting as we get into some of this like theology talk with part of this, because I feel like people think I'm crazy, but when you talk about politics, you almost have to talk about theology, because there's a level of, when you're talking about like what you want governed or not governed, you're discussing what you think morality is, what ethics are. The reason there's a law against stealing is because you think it is ethically wrong to steal, right? Like, so there's this level of like practicality, morality, ethics to it. And once you start involving that, you almost necessarily involve religion. And I think we're going to see that as we unpack that. So I wanted to go ahead and get to, we both have really unique parts of the Christian outlook, I suppose. You as a process theologian, I don't know what to label myself. To be sacrilegious for a minute, perhaps. I don't know. To make a lot of people mad. I almost like, I really want to just start calling myself a Christian Taoist and seeing who calls me on it. Because I really vibe with this idea that God or Jesus is the Tao, is the way. And when we are living in accordance with the Tao, we are in the right space. That is what it means to be saved. And when we're not in touch with that is when we need to learn to reconnect. And I feel like that kind of, it matters because like, do I think there is a real sense that Jesus Christ saves? Yes. What do I think that means? I think he's reconnecting us to the way. Like, I think there's this bigger thing that we are meant to be a part of, like a harmony that a lot of the times we're missing out on. So when we're talking about later, we're going to talk about like pirates and is it ever ethically correct? I'm thinking in this way of like, can you be a pirate and still be in the way or in the force or in God, if you will? So as a process theologian, I feel like your background's a little bit different, maybe not super different. I'm not sure. So when we start asking these questions, I think it's helpful for people to know where you're coming from. So could you kind of unpack some of like, when you say process theologian, what do you mean?
Yeah. So I guess what might be a little bit easier is to give like the general category of open and relational theology. Which is like, so a fair way to say this would be all process people are open and relational, but not all open and relational people are process. And so it might be helpful just, it's a little bit easier to understand the open and relational. So what I mean by that is we'll just do open and we'll do relational. So open is making a claim about how time works. In this case, an open and relational thinker believes that the future is genuinely open. It is not set in stone. It is open. So this is kind of a rejection of something like determinism, where everything is already preordained, predestined by the divine, something like that. So future is generally open. And then relational is making a claim about the divine and about us, namely that we are in genuine relationship with the divine, which requires we have the ability to impact the divine in the same way that the divine has the ability to impact us. So that's kind of the open and relational. And then I push it further and go into, I'm a process thinker, which is based off of the philosophy of organism, by Alfred North Whitehead, who is a famous American mathematician who then later dove into philosophy, specifically metaphysics. And so a lot of the stuff that you were talking about with Taoism and how you see salvation resonates deeply with me as a process person, because a big part of process is recognizing that like things aren't, there's no such thing as just like individuals that just exist somewhere. Rather, everything is deeply interconnected and interrelated. It's deeply relational. So that's a big part of it. And also nothing is static. Everything is in process. So that's, another element to it. And then finally, within process thinking, this is kind of the biggest shift. It breaks from a substance-based ontology, how we think the world works, and is more so an event-based ontology. So those are some of the differences, I guess.
Yeah. So it's going to be good. Sorry, I feel like this is a really basic question, but just because I don't know who all is watching or listening, I'm just going to ask it anyway. Would you still say Jesus saves?
Yes, but I would want to
clarify it.
I'd clarify what I mean by that. But yeah, I think that sure. Yeah, well for for sake of brevity, we'll say yes. And then, maybe we could talk about what that means later.
Man, yeah. I hadn't quite had to put words to my thoughts or flesh it out until so on my other podcast, the Whole Church podcast, we had a series that was Controversial Unity. And one of the episodes was Trip Fuller coming on talking to us about atonement theories. And I think I unintentionally stopped myself in my own studies at going, well, I don't agree with penal substitution. And I was like, I'm good now. And I hadn't actually thought, well, what do I believe? Rather than just defining it by what I don't believe. So it wasn't till recently I'm at more of a place of, I think the moment the divine took on flesh, that was the moment that all flesh, all humans, then had the ability to reconnect with the way, to reconnect with, God, the force, however I want to word it. Man, I'm being very Taoist. I think I really am just Christian Taoist, and I just don't want to call myself that because there's like a thing with like millennials all calling themselves like Buddhist or something, and then like you ask them about it and they don't actually know what it is, and I don't want to come off as one of those guys. Like I feel like I'm just being insecure.
No worries. Well, look, I'll does this make you less insecure?
Perfect.
So this is sitting on my desk next to a bunch of my other icons, and I've done significant reading, so I at least know a little bit of what I'm talking about there, and I'm quite comfortable in that space. But yeah, the atonement stuff is good. I mean, I listened to that episode with Drip. That was fun when you guys did that.
Yeah, it was a good time.
But yeah, I mean, I think the flesh thing though is I do want to say something because that's interesting because I think they're the Greek where it says the word became flesh. Sarx is the Greek, and that's is actually bigger than just like human flesh. It's like became stuff, became like all. So for me as a process person, who is I'm also a panentheist. So not pantheist, but panentheist. For listeners who don't know, that's like God is in the universe and the universe is within God. So I would say creation is incarnation. Is one way I'd speak about that. And I agree with you. I think there is something salvific about that. I just think it extends beyond people.
Yeah. I agree. I think that it extends beyond people. This is a conversation we should get it more to. Hey, I'm just going to pitch this while we're recording. I think you should jump on Whole Church to promote theology to your camp, and we'll talk more about that because that's something I want to get into. I think that's fun. That's a good topic.
Check out our merch online at the SG Shop. There you can find clothing such as hat, extra soft t-shirts, sweaters, hoodies, and more things like glassware, mugs, bags, and posters. My favorite shirt design is the one that says all reading counts. So make sure you check out the store and find your new favorite merch.
But guys, hey, I know what you're thinking. You're hearing us talk about theology and salvation, and that the idea that salvation happened the moment of incarnation. You're probably wondering, did Jesus need to die? And then your second thought was probably, what about the East India Trading Company? So
that's where my
it's a
mind
natural
went.
thing to think about. Yeah, like you think about salvation, you're like, wait a minute, wasn't there the East India Trading Company in Pirates of the Caribbean? So, I want to talk some about the I didn't know how to get back to the topic. Sorry, guys. But in the movie, you see from the very the very beginning, from the moment Captain Jack Sparrow appears in the first movie, he shows up and he gets captured because he saves a girl. Yada yada. I don't want to get too much into those details because this will be a very long podcast. We get all the details of all 4 movies. I don't count that last one. I'm sorry. I will not. I say I'm sorry. I will not apologize, but I guess I apologized. Sorry. I just don't count the 5th one. It just doesn't count to me. If you love it, hey, that's great. We love you. It doesn't mean I have to love the movie. But there's a moment in that first movie. He shows up. He gets captured, and they do that arm reveal. Where is it? And they see the P. He's like, oh, pirate. A little bit further, they see his Jack Sparrow. Like, oh, how to brush with the East India Trading Company, have we? Sorry, at one point I could have quoted the entire first movie. I watched it at least once a day, because I was very young when this came out, and I don't think I quite realized that I had obsession problems. And I was obsessed, hardcore obsessed. I watched this every single, because I had it on PSP of all things, the little portable PlayStation. Yeah. And I was like, man, I'm at school and my teacher doesn't even know that I'm watching Pirates of the Caribbean with the subtitles on. And I'm leaving school and I got it in and I literally was just watch it repeat constantly. I loved this thing, man.
It's a good one.
Yeah, so good. But yeah, so the moment he realizes that because he was branded, which I guess assumes that he was captured at some point, and that's how the East India Trading Company deals with those things. I don't know. The actual history of the East India Trading Company that I feel like if you know makes the movie a little bit more interesting. Maybe obviously happens when they're in India, and basically what happens is the government realizes there's certain things the government can't do officially, but if a private business or a private sector does it, and the government just lets it happen, then they're not culpable. So this company arises in India basically to enslave people and do all kinds of terrible, awful things to the people of India. Then when we discover America, what happens to that company? It starts coming this way. And it's because, it's a trading company. It's about the trading of certain things. And again, that rum episode, we talked a lot about piracy's involvement with rum. It was because rum was too good, which I stand by this. I stand by this historical fact. Rum was too good. And the religion of the time in history, England and I think it was Scotland, maybe it was Ireland. Basically, they had whiskey. They had other hard liquors. And what the church had decided was rum and sugarcane wine, which was a thing, that's against the Bible. God hates that stuff. God only likes whiskey is what the church decided. So God hates rum specifically. So it was outlawed because the religion in the church the religion in the government was so closely tied. They were able to just kind of do those kind of things and say, we want this to be a sin because we're not making money. And that's what happened. And you know what happened then? Pirates said, what a really easy way to make money would be? We'll take this rum and give it to people and charge them way too much because it's illegal and you really can't govern how we're doing it. So naturally, the East India Trading Company hated pirates because they weren't able to trade their stuff and make more money because pirates were selling the good stuff behind their backs, which was rum. Sorry. Rum is my favorite. Like that is my drink of choice. So I am very biased.
I respect it. Rum's pretty good. I mean, I tend to stay away from hard alcohol just because, like, I don't know.
It's a sin.
I know. Yeah, because it's a sin, and beer is not a sin. So, I'm more comfortable with like how beer impacts my body. And I know what beer is going to do to me. I know how to act like a human while I'm drinking beer. Hard alcohol starts making my brain do funny stuff. So
yeah,
that's when I get in trouble.
That's fair. That's fair. Ironically, the church I grew up in, I thought was always against alcohol because just the way it acted. I mean, mind you, this is a church where in my lifetime, it decided it was okay for people to start having wedding bands. Like super conservative church that I grew up in. But I discovered that I was wrong. It actually, its official stance is that beer and wine is okay, but strong alcohol is not, because there's that Bible verse of like, don't give yourself over to strong liquors or something like that. You know what I'm talking about?
Interesting. All right.
Yeah, they took that very literally.
Yeah.
I don't take that very literally. I don't take that so literally. I'm like, I'm to the point of like, where the Bible says drunkenness, I think that is like a habitual thing of being drunk. And I think there is wisdom in not constantly being drunk all the time. So I'm like, yeah, I support that. Yeah. Being drunk occasionally, I don't think the Bible really says anything about that. And also, I think it's good for you to occasionally be drunk. Like personally, I think sometimes, you know, you're at Theology Beer Camp, your brain is just toasted and you said, you know what, I need to let loose. And that last night, you go over to the Geek stage and you're like, Josh, do you still have rum with you? And I'm like, yeah, man. Yeah. And we pour some rum and white monster. It's great. And we mix it and we just have a nice mixed drink. It's a great time.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I think that was a nice plug too. Well done. That was.
I can't wait for Trip to watch this and then just text me of like, Josh, stop bringing rum to beer camp.
Nah, I don't think
hard liquor camp.
I believe I won't out them, but I know for a fact that there are others who, you know, trade in the stronger alcohols that are a sin at Theology Beer Camp. Perfect. Yeah, one of them was a speaker. One of them was a speaker last year. So and one of them runs like the whole fucking thing. So not going to name names, but
oh man, no, that's great. I think what's really funny. Sorry, this is a side tangent. I think some of my best episodes recording have also been after I've had some rum and I'm like a little buzzed, and it's like some of your filter is gone, but not all of it. And that's when you're at your best, right? Like,
yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's the history of the East India Trading Company. And also some fun about Theology Beer Camp, I guess. I didn't intend this to just be a long advertisement, guys. I'm sorry. I just really like Theology Beer Camp. It's gonna be good.
I agree. It's super fun. Yeah, because last year I was bummed you didn't get to hang out, right?
I think that's part of it too. Is like my anticipation is like really high because I had to miss it last year because of financial troubles, and this year I decided to have my financial troubles early so that I'd be fine by beer camp.
Smart. Yes.
Yeah. Look, I'll deal with it. I'll deal with it now, and then later I'll be okay.
There we go.
Yeah. Speaking of finances, the East India Trading Company was basically the government's out to do people terribly so that they could make more money. So the government was having their pockets lined from the East India Trading Company. So when it's mentioned in the movie, you're immediately like, if you know the history, you're like, oh shit, this is when stuff goes down, right? And I think what's interesting is it Ed Norrington? Is that his name? The guy in the movie who first captures Jack?
Yeah, Norrington, who was, what was he at the time? Because he became Commodore. Yeah, Commodore Norrington. He was about to get knighted isn't the right word, but he was about to be named
naval knotted.
Yeah, and yes, he's the one who catches him.
Yeah, he later ends up working for the East India Trading Company too, right?
Yeah, he has kind of like a, I don't know, I guess you could call, it's hard to say who's the villain and heroes in the movie, but he has like somewhat of a villain arc after the Navy kind of turns on him. He does his own thing.
Oh yeah. So So in the movie, their story is a little bit not different, but their story isn't around India. Their story is like revolving around Captain Jack Sparrow and the pirates that we're following in the films. Josh, could you kind of unpack for us some, like, what role does the East India Trading Company play specifically in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies?
Yeah, all right. I'm going to do I'm going to do my best. Because although I've watched these movies a million times, I fail at things like this frequently. So I think, one of the biggest roles that, if I remember correctly, that they play isn't that who gets involved with the whole Davy Jones thing?
Oh yeah. They
yeah.
Yeah, they tried to buy Davy Jones' heart at one point.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so so they're kind of sketchy doing things like that. Because I'm trying to remember who represents it. I think, is it the creepy guy with like dark brown hair? Is he this guy?
Man,
Beckett,
yeah,
right?
I was like, I see the back of his head. I was trying to think of his name.
Yeah,
Beckett's right. Yeah. For some reason, I thought Beckett. If I went to the next slide, I'd see it.
Yeah. So Beckett, and he eventually does. He gets the heart and tries to control the seas, basically, because Davy Jones has the Kraken, which if you unleash the Kraken on a ship, the ship is done. So it's fun because he there's lots of kind of backdoor deals being set up throughout the films, because Beckett is working with the Navy at one point, but then also he tries to get Sparrow involved, and ultimately Sparrow gets the best of him. Which is one of my favorite scenes. Spoiler alert, but that's one of my favorite scenes, where he has the realization that he's just been had by Captain Jack Sparrow. Which, if he would have just known that Jack always tells the truth, Jack now doesn't lie, he always tells the truth, he would have realized it was just business.
Yeah. I think what's so funny to me, and man, this is weird how much law is coming up this episode. Jack Sparrow would be an excellent lawyer, right? Like Captain Jack, he words things so well that you think he means one thing, and then later when things come around, you're like, oh, he meant this completely other thing, and everything always works out in his favor in the end. Man, good stuff.
Yeah, I think this is a little bit off topic, but Jack, if you could, I would qualify Jack Sparrow as an anti-hero, and I think Jack Sparrow is my favorite anti-hero. Or anti-hero, if that's the shorter way to say it, but I love it. And the scene where he's on the beach with, I think this is in the second one, with Norrington, when they finally find the heart, it's buried in the sand or whatever. Mm-hmm. And Norrington's like, you were telling the truth? And he was like, I do that an awful lot, and everybody seems always to be surprised. And yet everyone is always surprised, or something like that. I love that.
I love the moment in the first movie where he's talking to Will, and he does that thing where he's like, you can always trust a dishonest person to be dishonest. It's the honest ones you have to look out for.
Yeah.
It's so good. Funny. Yeah. Well, it what's funny is you see this, and also I think it's probably why maybe a lot of people think it's kind of weird that I'm into pirates and stuff. Cause just me as a person, I have that kind of personality where I'm always rule based, Captain America is my man. I like structure. I like rules. But I find something really compelling about these stories where the rules and the system is so messed up. We have to do something outside of that. And what's fun about Captain Jack Sparrow is it's like he plays by the rules just to break the rules. And you're like,
right. Yeah.
Ow. He is a paradox into himself. And it's wonderful. So you see this first movie, you see the government kind of discover stuff with the pirates. They're chasing them. The East India Trading Company plays a very small role. I think they're basically just mentioned in passing kind of thing. Mm-hmm. The second movie, everybody's out to find Jack. And that's where you start seeing this company start sneaking in. And they're making deals with the Navy. They're making deals with other pirates. And they're doing what they can. And that's... I think it confused me as a kid, because I was like, wait a minute, why is the governor talking to this pirate or this or whatever? Because it's the East India Trading Company. So they can do what they want because they're not technically the government.
Right.
Even though they very clearly are working for the government.
Right.
Yeah. They're dressed the same. Come on. But they move in, they make deals. Eventually, that third movie, they end up with Davy Jones' heart at one point. And that's where you get that scene where I think one of the most picturesque moments of all the films is they have Davy Jones' heart, and they think they have a deal with Will Turner. Mm-hmm. So you see Will Beckett and Davy Jones coming out on this little water bank. I don't know what you call that. On a little thing of sand in the middle of the water. They come out, and on the other side, representing the pirates, you have Captain Jack Sparrow, Elizabeth Swann, and someone. Why can't I remember who the third person was?
It might have been
Brain's
Norrington.
Oh, no. I know who it was. It was Barbosa.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Barbosa. You're right.
Yeah. So they're coming out representing the pirates. And it's just like this really picturesque moment where you see 3 meets 3. And it's, if you think it's weird that Jack Sparrow's on the one side, you're right. Will's on the wrong side. And Jack played everybody, put everyone in their spot. And I think that it wasn't until that movie that Will kind of realized, maybe I should just trust this guy. Because even when he sells me to the bad guys, he has a plan.
Yeah, he's doing because I mean, you would think he would have learned that from the first movie, because he, basically gets Will captured and they're about to kill him, to kind of break the curse, because Will is dumb and admits like who his dad is. Even though Jack was like, don't do anything stupid. Yeah. And so, but he has that kind of subtle nod to Will where he's, says something along the lines of like waiting for like the exact right moment, which was like something he had said to Will earlier in the film. So it's kind of like this wink at him, like, dude, trust me. Like, and that's when he steals the coin. So the curse has not been lifted and blah, blah, blah. So Will doesn't learn until the third movie, I guess.
Will's kind of dumb. And I think that's what's interesting, though, in these films, because you can get, it's really easy to watch them and just be like, oh, pirates, fun, water, fights, sea creatures, and just only watch it for fun. And I think that's honestly a really good way to watch them. Like, I'm not belittling that at all. I think that's a great way to watch them. It's so much like these movies really are just so much fun. Every now and then and I do get to say this often. I'm not an alcoholic. I occasionally do really stupid stuff and follow it up with and that was without a single drop of rum. Like it just great lines, great time. Like these movies are so much fun. Like honestly, I think this and Indiana Jones are the two things I wish we got to talk more about on Systematic Geekology.
Nice.
Because like my main fandoms are probably these two: Indiana Jones, Pirates of the Caribbean, Marvel, and Star Wars. Marvel and Star Wars comes out with stuff all the time. I get to talk about that pretty frequently, but these I don't get to talk about that much because they're far and few between. And Disney maybe screwed Johnny Depp, depending on how you look at it. Whatever.
Right.
But I think it's interesting, though, because in these films, there are those who are doing these things in secret or these, trades or whatever. And then there's Captain Jack Sparrow, who just he doesn't even necessarily represent the good guys. It's like he represents the common man and also maybe common sense sometimes. Like, the whole, they say all these terrible things and no one survives. And he's like, where do the stories come from? No one survives. Where do the stories come from? So it's like he is the common man and also wields the incredible weapon of common sense. Or maybe just structured logic. He probably got along really well with Aristotle. So the East India Trading Company makes all these deals with the pirates, with the government, everything they can to line their pockets and to gain power. I think the thing that's interesting is it's not just money they're after, it's power, right? They want to control the seas. And I think that's true of a lot of people. And I think that's a lot of politics today is really just about power. It's not about money. It's not about anyone's well-being. A lot of the time, it's just about who has power. We're going to intentionally not vote for this thing because that'll make people angry enough that they'll vote for us next time and we can get power.
Yeah,
that
sounds about right.
Yeah. Like it's just how politics work. So I want to ask, like, as far as like everyone thinks as Davy Jones as like the big threat in the first 3 Pirates movies anyway. If you had to evaluate it, do you think the East India Trading Company is actually more of an antagonist or scarier than Davy Jones just because like how they're doing things?
Yeah, so I'll say yes. And I'll defend it by saying like, so I think, Jones is like just doing the job that Davy Jones was assigned to do, right? Like pretty much that's what he does. Like, even his altercation with Jack Sparrow is like Jones is supposed to, take people into the ship or deal with afterlife stuff, whatever. He's doing that job. Jack is trying to screw him over, right? By getting out of the deal that he made with him. And Jones is just trying to be like, dude, I'm doing my job. And so he's more or less concerned with just doing that. And so the East Indian Trading Company, I think, is more of a threat because they're trying to take someone like Jones and weaponize him for their own personal gain and for power, as you were saying. So I think they are scarier, and that they're more dangerous because they're taking someone like Jones, who, like, I mean, already is scary, right? Like, you know, ravishing ships, killing people, making them a part of the crew forever. That's terrifying. But now there's a bigger, you know, fish in the sea, so to speak, coming and trying to harness that power. So,
yeah. I think what's interesting is, like, I haven't put a lot of thought of it, honestly, until we started preparing for this particular episode. I usually just watch Pirates of the Caribbean for fun, and often I'm drinking rum while watching it. So there's just not a lot of thinking going on.
Yeah.
Unleash the Kraken. The Kraken happens to be my favorite rum. So, I mean, every time they say that, you got to unleash the Kraken a little bit.
Well, you're a stout person, right? You said you like stouts?
Yeah.
I brewed, so I did, this was home brewing, not when I was doing commercial brewing, but I did a stout that I basically tried to simulate a barrel-aged stout. And so I got Kraken rum and soaked American oak chips in the Kraken rum, and then added that Kraken rum to my stout post fermentation, and it worked wonderfully. It was delicious.
How hard would it be to convince you to do that again?
Not hard.
That might be an off the air conversation.
There we go.
That sounds great. But yeah. So what's interesting is, like, I think Davy Jones, and this is really interesting for our context, he represents, like, the mystical and maybe even the religious of the world, right? Like, he is this force that's beyond nature, supernatural. You have the Kraken that defines, you know, life itself. Even, like, you get eaten by a Kraken and you go to the afterlife, which is off the edge of the world, which who the hell could make sense of that? I have no idea.
Right.
So you have, like, all these things he represents, this, like, the mystic, the religious, the spiritual, the mystery, being controlled by Beckett, who I think basically just represents capitalism. Like, he's just the private sector. Like,
right.
And then you also have, like, the government, who was originally going after Jack Sparrow and all this stuff. And they're, like, the main bad guys of the first movie, right? It's like the English government, who is basically suppressing people because they're being too dogmatic, which there's a whole religious discussion in that too, right? And they're the big bags of the first, who almost immediately succumb to the East India Trading Company because money is nice. Money is power. So the government's under their control. The mystic, the religious, is under their control. They're wielding the mystic, the spiritual, and the government all at once. And I'm like, I never thought about them as, like, scary. Like, he was just kind of an annoying character. I was like, why'd they add this guy? And the more I think about it, I'm like, oh, he was actually the scariest guy when you think about it. Like, Beckett was terrifying.
And I mean, I think, to your point, that merger of, you know, to simplify your metaphors there, church and state, I think is terrifying. I mean, this is going to be Josh's, you know, some of Josh's political opinion coming out now. But I think the weaponizing of Christianity in, you know, service of the government is just not great, for lack of a better term. I have some very Anabaptist tendencies. So I'm big on, like, nonviolence. I'm big on, like, separation of church and state and stuff. And so to see, in my opinion, a current political party using Christianity as a facade to garnish votes and power is scary in a similar way. So
I'm going to a little bit. I'm sorry. So usually we don't, like, get, like, too specific in our own politics here, but I think when it's relevant, I feel like it's important that we actually do just kind of, like, discuss this stuff from, like, a moral standpoint, and not, hey, here's who you should vote for. That's not what we're doing. Don't worry. I'm not getting into that, guys. I actually want to put a little bit of fault to one of my favorite politicians. Barack Obama.
Yeah.
Had actually, he made the statement to other Democrats that he thought they were really messing up by not leaning more into this religious language. And he used it to great good. Like, I think everything Obama did was great. And he used this religious language to get more people on board. And we saw a lot of good stuff happen because of that. However, and again, this is like, our listeners are really annoyed with me talking about utilitarian arguments all the time. But that's the thing. He justified his action with utilitarian arguments. Like, well, I'm going to use this religious language because we have good things in the end that actually supports his religious beliefs. But the problem is that opened the door for Donald Trump, who I have said on this show before, I think is evil. And I know other people might have other opinions, and hey, I respect you. I might not respect Donald Trump. I respect you. I respect your opinions. I love everybody. I just feel like it's important to be honest, right? Like, I think Donald Trump is just an evil person. And it opened the door for him to do the exact same thing, where he's trying to use this kind of religious rhetoric. I am your retribution. You know, like, he's using religious language. I would say to great harm. And I think part of why he was able to do is because the people before him, not just Obama, but lots of people before him, had already started down that road. So no one batted an eye when he started using the same language. And all of a sudden, we're in this place where a lot of people are convinced what it means to be Christian is to be violent, to be anti certain communities, bigoted, all these things that just aren't Christian, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree with you. And I mean, I think you're right to point to the history, because it does go, quite a ways back. And I mean, someone who's really up on the history of like the development of Christian nationalism and stuff is Tim Whitaker over at the New Evangelicals. Tim knows his stuff in that regard. And I've done a decent amount of reading on it. Because I mean, I think Christian nationalism is bad because it's how you get Nazis. Yes. And I think most people hopefully would agree that Nazis are not a good thing. And I'm not trying to use that language to be alarmist, but I think there's definitely some parallels that can be drawn between the rise of Nazism during the time of Dietrich Bonhoeffer and the way the church was involved with that. And certain things that are going on today. And I know about a project that's, I don't think it's public information yet, but there's a project that a buddy of mine is working on with some of the leading Bonhoeffer scholars that is tracing those parallels very carefully. That's going to, be launching this whole big project coming out soon. So it's a thing to at least pay attention to.
Yeah, I actually thought the Bonhoeffer craze was like a fad, like, because all of a sudden everybody was studying Bonhoeffer like a couple years back, and I'm like, what? And so usually when everybody jumps on board on something, I just ignore it. But I actually looked into some of the stuff, and I was like, it really feels like when you read some of Dietrich Bonhoeffer's work, you're like, it feels like he's writing to us in our country right now. Like, it does not feel that, like, it doesn't feel different at all. Actually, you're like, is he talking about Trump? But then you realize, oh, no, he's talking about Adolf Hitler. And not to be the guy who's like, oh, Hitler is bad. But it's like, oh, like the same things are happening in our own country.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like Bonhoeffer's. So I interviewed this dude, this like well-renowned scholar, Dietrich Bonhoeffer scholar, Jeffrey Pugh, about Bonhoeffer. And he refers to Bonhoeffer as kind of like a Rorschach test, because people can see Bonhoeffer and kind of draw out of Bonhoeffer what they want, depending on how far into their reading they're willing to go. Kind of like how people abuse the work of Martin Luther King Jr., but that's a different rant for another day.
Yes.
And so, for example, someone like Eric Metaxas, who took Dietrich Bonhoeffer and made him like the hero of like white Western evangelicalism, is a bastardization of Bonhoeffer and everything that Bonhoeffer stood for. And there's some projects that are actually, there's a movie coming out soon that's like far right-wing propaganda type stuff that's championing Bonhoeffer as their person. And so this project that I know about is kind of a response to that, in a sense. But it's interesting. Anyway.
Man. Yeah, that's man, I can't wait to get you over on Whole Church. Man, there's so much there. But yeah, I think it's telling. And I think Dietrich Bonhoeffer would have a lot to say of how, in these movies and in real life, it's the same thing, actually, in this instance. The East India Trading Company had the government in its pocket. It had the spiritual in its pocket. And like the government was the church. Like I feel like that gets left out of the movies, but that's like a historical fact that's really hard for Americans to understand. But like the Queen of England, the King of England is the head of the Anglican Church. Like they are not separate. Like they are expected to do churchly duties. And it's always really funny to me because like people talk about like Christian nationalism and America being like God's country. And I'm like, and a lot of people on our side really react to that. I was like, oh no, this isn't God's country and blah. You're reading all this stuff about Israel. And I'm like, okay, hold up. We do have a problem, but I feel like somehow we miss the fact that there are other countries where the government literally is the church. Like it is the same thing in some countries. And to think that we are the specially chosen nation, you know how many countries that aren't America, because America doesn't do this, that you can add a tax, like you can have your taxes include your tithes. Like it's just that closely related. Like that's just a thing in a lot of countries. And yeah, so to think America specially chosen, until your taxes can pay your tithes, calm down a little bit. But anyway, I think what's interesting is like how all these lines aren't very clear, and yet the bad guys are clearly on the structured side. Like they're clearly on the systemic sin, systemic, slavery, systemic owning of the seas, the systemic sin of power lust, I guess would be how I would word that. So with that in mind, and with the theology stuff we discussed earlier, can God ever be on the side of pirates? We think of usually God as like this rule based, he created the rules, but is there ever a moment where we're more in touch with the force or the Tao, or we're more in relationship with God in an act of piracy or anti-government?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a complicated question, but I mean, I think from, say something like, if I were to draw on like liberation theology, for example, which is theology essentially done by people in the margins, oppressed people groups, this kind of thing. A big thing that comes out of that is that God chooses sides, that God is on the side of the oppressed, which I mean, I think is a very biblical notion. I don't think that's too controversial in regard to at least biblical stories and stuff. And, we see Jesus challenging the powers of Jesus's day, namely the Roman Empire, which in my opinion is what ultimately gets Jesus killed, because he was seen as an insurrectionist, challenging the powers of the day, the way things were ran, offering a different way, right? And so I think there's definitely that subversive element, kind of anti-imperial element that I think you could tie in with pirates. But then it's like, okay, but what about like the rape and the pillaging? Not so great. So maybe it's like the idea is acceptable, but like maybe we can argue about if killing people is a good idea or not. So maybe the means that it's carried out in or something like that. But I can tell you that with all of my, religious and moral, convictions aside, I do find myself cheering for the side of the pirates. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, in fairness, the movie version of pirates, I don't think the pirates here are really raping or murdering as much. Right. They're just kind of out for themselves a little bit, Yeah.
Right.
So we do have to take that into account. So we're talking about fictional pirates and real pirates at the same time, and that makes things confusing. What's interesting? So have you ever read anything by Reza Aslan by chance?
I have not. I know who he is.
Stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He's like a world religion scholar for those who don't know. So he's not like a Christian author or anything like that. He is Muslim, but he's writing as a religious scholar, looking at the religion almost as a third party. And he writes Jesus of Nazareth, or I think the book's called Zealot.
Yeah, Zealot.
So yeah. So it's interesting that like I love that book. It's so good. And one of the things he brought out that really changed my thinking is Zealot at that time. So we kind of have this disconnect. We read that and we're thinking the word zealot of, okay, passionate, whatever. The word they were using was like a title for a group of people, right? Like it would be like calling, hey, there's those terrorists, there's, whatever. Like it was for a specific political movement.
Mm-hmm.
So Jesus was identified with a political movement that was anti-establishment. I don't think it would be unreasonable to think if Jesus was born in the 1800s in the Caribbean that he'd be a pirate.
Yeah. I think it could work out. Yeah.
Yeah, like Jesus the pirate. That's the episode.
Yeah, well, there's actually, it reminds me, there's a guy named Kester Bruin. He's a radical theologian out of the UK, and he has a book. It's a bit old now, and I think he actually has more recently written an article like responding to it, like, here's what I got right, here's what I got wrong. But the book is called Mutiny: Why We Love Pirates and How They Can Save Us, and it's a radical theology of pirates.
Oh, yeah,
So,
I've actually just recently had someone send me the link. I've been meaning to get that.
nice. Well, Kester also has this is totally off topic, but he has a new book out about AI, and it's fantastic. Yeah.
Man. Yeah. Yeah. That's also the Josh that does the more reading. So I got to catch up. But Mutiny, have you read Mutiny yet?
I haven't. I just learned about it recently because I got connected to Kester over the AI book.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to have to. Yeah. I need to check that one out. My favorite pirate book, for those wondering, Empire of Blue Waters, about Henry Morgan. It's fantastic.
Nice.
But that's just an aside. It's also a book about religion and government, and how when government gets involved with religion and creates a civil war, how sometimes the only logical thing to do is to become a pirate to help supply the needs of others, if that need is rum. It's fine. Yeah. Anyway, so I think it's not unreasonable to think of like Jesus the pirate, Jesus the zealot. The difference being like, just because you are a pirate does not mean you have to rape and murder. Those things are still evil, I think. So I think for me personally, I'm going to talk personal, and I'll let you do. I'll talk Taoist and you can talk process. But, I'm thinking of like the way, if I think of like the harmony of God, when the system, the government is so out of harmony, it only to me makes logical sense that then the way to be closest to God, it's not to just compromise with the government and to just become one with that. It would rather be to not be one with that because it's out of sync, and rather be in sync with something else. Piracy probably still isn't the way to go, but I think there is a way to be not in the system that's outside of the way, that, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think the system is the answer, but I don't think piracy is also the answer either, but I don't think the system is the answer.
Yeah. I mean, I'll go, I'll bite, and I'll go back into the things that I used to preach about when I was a pastor, which was the kingdom of God, which I think is the center and heart of Jesus's message, which Jesus is proclaiming a different way of existing in the world and inviting people into it. I like John Cobb calls it the Commonwealth of God. That's a little bit nicer way of talking about it now. At least here in the States, we don't really have kingdoms, and also like gets rid of the hierarchy aspect, which is a big process thing, right? So the Commonwealth stuff, but this is an inherently anti-imperial thing. Like, it's saying no. Like, for me, what I would always used to preach about is like, you can't serve two masters, right? You're either going to love one or hate the other. And so for Christians, the call is an invitation to live into this other way of being in the world, which is to ascribe our allegiance. Our pistis is the Greek word. Faith is what it's often translated as, to the kingdom of God, which is subversive. And so, like, if you want to go that route, then it's like, pirates. But
yeah, man,
yeah, mutiny.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably keep doing this all day. But I think one of the big questions I think the movies ask us, if we're trying to like think of it as a movie that wants us to think rather than just fun pirates, which, let's be honest, it's fun pirates first.
It is fun pirates.
Yeah, fun pirates. Let's just say, get that out of the way. Fun pirates. But I think one of the questions it's trying to ask us is this question of like, where are the lines drawn? Can we see, is there even a difference between religion, politics, the spiritual, and capitalism even? Because, these Indian trading companies, all about money, all about power. How do we tell the difference? Like, when these lines start to blur, where do you find solace in like knowing what the difference is?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that's a difficult question. Because I think it's wise to recognize that the lines do cross, that they do blur. And as a process person who sees everything as deeply interrelated and interconnected, the fact of the matter is that all of these things exist in relationship to one another and inform one another. Like, I think it'd be really hard, for example, if I sat down and tried to even separate from within you, like, all right, I'm going to interview Josh now, and I'm going to separate from Josh his political beliefs, his religious beliefs, whatever. I think it would be difficult because they all mutually are connected with one another. They all inform each other. And so it's really difficult. And, also, I'm not like an anthropologist or sociologist who gets paid to try to figure out questions like that. But I think ultimately blurring the lines is what happens. And then maybe the trick is just being wise and acknowledging that. Kind of like acknowledging that we all have blind spots. And, it's not that we're ever going to be able to get rid of them, but we can at least acknowledge that we have them, and it'll make us more, self-aware as we go throughout the world. So maybe it's something like that.
Yeah, I think that's something I've learned as I've grown too. It's just kind of like when I change my belief in one area, it slowly, sometimes very slowly, but it does stem out to other things. And I think that's the thing here. Like, that's part of why it's so hard to tell the difference between Beckett, Norrington, Davy Jones. All they're all just bad guys on the water, right?
Yeah.
But I think there's this sense of Davy Jones, pirate, Jack Sparrow, pirate. But it's very easy to tell who's the good and bad guy, right? And I'm not trying to get to, hey, vibes are the answer, guys.
Right.
But when I think of like the Tao, and I think of like the way, and I think of like what is good, what is God, what is love, what is Jesus, and that's what gets tricky for me because, we've both talked about it. I'm very anti-Christian nationalist. I don't believe we need to have a Christian as president. But because of what I believe, I believe there's the sense of harmony that we all need to be in with God, the divine, love. And that means that I think our government should be in harmony with that. Does that mean I think our government should say, hey, everybody love Jesus? No. But it does mean I'm going to believe in a government that's pro-love, pro-caring for others, pro-immigrant, that kind of thing, because to me, that's part of the way. When I think about my finances, I'm not going to be, well, how can I get the most power and use my money for the most control? My thing is like, okay, what does it mean to be part of love? So just like you said, like even individually, we can't draw those lines. So when we talk about Christian nationalism being bad, I don't think what we're saying is we don't want people who are going to cause these outcomes we like, or, to do these things we like. I think what we're saying is that shouldn't be the prerequisite, is that they say these words and follow this religion. It's rather more of like a deeper sense of what we believe is right and wrong in the world, right?
Yeah, no, I like that. And I think if I were to have to pick some kind of tool to be kind of, that guide for the wisdom that I was talking about and what you were just referencing, I would go to love, because I strongly believe that God is love, big L, capital L, love. Like that's the essence of who the divine is. And I really like Thomas J. Ord, who I know you've had on Whole Church before.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's done systematic ecology, but his definition of love, and for listeners of this show, Tom Ord has like done the most theological exposition of love, like in recent times. It's odd because you would think Christians would write about love, but they don't. And so Ord's definition is great. He says, to love is to act intentionally in relational response to God and others to promote overall well-being. And so I think if we can apply that throughout, that might be a helpful tool in navigating all of these spaces.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying, and I think this is what you're saying too, it's not about camps or tribes or anything like that. Like, I'm not going to vote for someone or support a government just because it says Christian on the front or East India Trading Company's branded on it, right?
Right.
Rather, it's more, is it supporting the values I care about? And also, it just so happens that for me, my religion isn't about saying I'm Christian or Taoist. Like, I'm not really into terms as such. I'm more thinking, what is the way? Is it love? Is it these things? And how much in sync am I and the things around me with that?
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And I think the tribalism is dangerous. I mean, I think the way, how divided the politics in this country has become is deeply problematic on both sides. I mean, I think the polarization exists on both sides. There's kind of a, you see like, fascism gets leveled against the right all the time. But I also think you could say there's somewhat of a almost like a moral fascism or something like that on the left, where you just fucking cancel everybody all the time. And so I think that's dangerous, because then what it does is it continues to separate us, and it's all based on identity and ideologies. But what it fails to recognize is that, like, you were talking about, financial issues and not being able to go to beer camp last year. I feel those same exact financial issues. And guess what? There are people who think very differently politically than me, who vote for somebody that I think is morally abhorrent, that is a monster. I think they could be racist. They could be this, that, or the other. But guess what? They also have financial issues because the government is fucking them too. And so by having these separated like silos all the time, we're not able to come together and recognize, like, hey, I can't eat food and you can't eat food. Maybe we should do something about this. So anyway, I don't want to, that's, maybe getting a little bit too preachy, forgive me. But I think you're right. And love can be a driving force in that. I can, I don't know, do something crazy like love my neighbor as myself. But
yeah, man, it's crazy because like I didn't plan this as the last episode in our like 8-week series, because I was like, this is going to perfectly show everyone why politics and everything are like actually like the same thing. It was really just because more people voted for this than the other things. So I thought they'd be more excited for this episode.
Right on. Well, hopefully I didn't disappoint.
Yeah, So now we're here and I'm like, oh, this is actually like a perfect example of like how fandom, right? How religion, politics, all these things do tie together. Tribalism is dangerous. Principles, I think, are important. So if your principles as a Christian is to vote for someone who's going to care for the needy, who's going to, put programs in that's going to care for immigrants, that kind of thing, that's great, right? Like that's the kind of thing I think we should be doing, not necessarily going, I'm voting for this party because this is what Christians do. Like that's tribalism. That's not great. But that's my opinion. Maybe other people disagree. I'm not the smartest person in the world. I love Ord's definition of love, and I think that is something we should all pursue. Maybe we don't need to pursue piracy. We can just pursue love. But hey, look at these pirates. Look at their faces. Those are great.
Cool pirates.
That's the face of love right there.
I mean,
love of rum.
I still get chills like every time, towards the end of the first movie when Elizabeth's dad says, oh, well, he is just a humble blacksmith after all. And she says, no, he's a pirate. Goosebumps every time. I'm like, yeah, I want to be a pirate.
Oh, man. Yeah, these films are precious and dear to me. And great movies, great fun, great topic, actually, man. I think we could just keep going and talking, but I actually have other podcasts to record. So I hope this was helpful to people thinking about like, where we draw the lines, where we don't draw the lines, and how our values actually spread out to our politics, our religion, our spirituality, and maybe even our finance a little bit. I did want to throw out there, because I forgot to mention it in the Scrooge McDuck episode, and wow, this series has covered a lot of different things.
Scrooge McDuck.
The private sector is a big part of this too. Like, is the East India Trading Company is just like the government abusing the private sector to do its evil means. And I just thought it was fun to bring that up, because I'm a big proponent of turning more things over to the private sector, whether it be, some of our medications, pharma, that kind of stuff, roads even. I think the private sector could probably do it better than the government. But this is a really good example of why I'm not always right. And sometimes private sector is actually more manipulative and more scary than the government. So here's an example of what I believe and why it's wrong. Hope everybody appreciates that.
Yeah, and I don't know. This was fun, dude. Thanks for having me on. Politics, I'll talk about politics at the bar with my friends, but it's a thing that makes me deeply uncomfortable, because I feel out of my pay grade when it comes to politics. If you want to talk about theology, we'll go all day. But
theology pirates made it more comfortable.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun, so I appreciate it. And people feel free to disregard my political opinions, but all of my theology is correct. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh man, I love having you on. It was really a blast. But hey, at the beginning, we talked about some bad political actors. And I said at the end, we're going to uplift some good ones. And I accidentally uplifted a good one first. So I messed up. But let me go ahead and say, I want to go to the Bible. King Josiah That's one I'm going to uplift. I like how in the biblical narrative, whether true or not, yeah, that's debatable. He was the one who brought the Bible back, and he brought texts that people had never read before. And immediately afterwards, everyone goes into exile. And I just like this idea that him recognizes this piece of literature as something valuable. And rather than hoarding and gatekeeping the literature, he opens it up to everyone to experience this wisdom, wrestle with the words and the text. And that's what they're able to go into the exile with. And I think that's why God's people remain questioning and talking about these things to this day, is because he opened the text up to the people. And I think that's an important thing for us all to do. Okay, that's mine. Josh, you have a positive political actor you want to uplift?
Now you're going to see how much of a cynic I am.
Oh, no.
I was racking my brain. I don't know. I am just so averse to politics and ascribing my name to any whatever. But I don't know, dude. I mean, you had an example in the paper that I just thought was cool because, like, I loved the movie, like King T'Challa, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
I love his bit about in times of chaos and peril, wise leaders don't build walls, they build bridges. And I just think that's a really that's solid advice.
Man, yeah.
That I think we could utilize today. So I don't know if that's a bit of a cop out or not, but
no, that's a good one.
That's a good one.
Yeah. I half expected you to just lean into the mic and
yeah. So there is that aspect. I didn't like Mufasa. I had, I was thinking about this on the way home, and like, it doesn't quite fit, but like, I was going to say something about Woody from Toy Story as like maybe a positive example.
That's a fun one.
But then they're going to be like, this all the movies Josh has watched is just Disney movies.
Yes.
Because we have Lion King, we have Toy Story, and Pirates of the Caribbean. Yeah.
For those who don't know, when you're born with the name Josh, you're given a contract at birth to sponsor Disney.
Yeah.
You don't really get a choice. Oh man, yeah, no,
because of the powers that be.
Huge Disney nerd. Yeah. Oh, man, good stuff though. Hey guys, if you are watching this on YouTube, smash the like and subscribe button so that you aren't smashing Will's heart. It's important. He gets really sad when y'all don't hit like and subscribe. So do that.
Oh yeah, he does.
Yeah.
Shout out to Will.
I love Will. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, rate and review. If you listen on Spotify, hit the 5 stars and that little bell so that you get notifications when we have other episodes. And if you're on a laptop, go over to Podchaser, rate and review. That helps the algorithm say that other people should listen to us, and that helps us. So thanks. Also, big shout out to Austin Ants for sponsoring the show. You rock. Guys, remember, if you want to hear other primarily political episodes, there is a link down below in the show notes. You can hear other episodes about politics and fandoms and religion and all these things that we blurred lines with today. And of course, remember, we're all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests.
Hey guys, Christian here to talk about our Captivate options. That's when you send us a little extra money to just help us along with our projects. But what do you get by giving us that extra money? Well, you have access to any future online D&D campaigns. You get extra bonus question content, which we do at least 48 times a month. You can make a one-time donation here of any amount to help support the show. This helps us with our overhead. That includes the editing software that we use, the recording software that we use, the marketing that we have to do for the show, the equipment that we all need to use to help out with the show, and more. So thank you for what you do. Head out to Captivate. Help us out. We really appreciate what you do. See you later.
Hey friends, this is your pal, Will Rose, and I have some exciting news. Systematic Geekology will return to Theology Beer Camp this year, October 17th through the 19th in Denver, Colorado. And we hope that you can join us. We are a part of Theology Beer Camp in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, at my home church in my hometown. And that year, Theology Beer Camp was called the God Pods. And then we were in Missouri, a part of the Geek Stage. Yes, we had a whole entire Geek Stage where we had workshops and speakers and had incredible conversations. And Theology Beer Camp last year was called the God Pods Strike Back. So you kind of see where this is going. And so this year, the theme is the return of the God Pods. And so if you head over to Eventbrite and follow God Pods 2024, or hop over to Instagram, follow it there. And if you enter promo code Geekshire, you see what we did there? Yeah. Wilbo Baggins approves. If you enter Geekshire, all caps, no spaces, you'll get $25 off your ticket price. Geekshire, all caps, no spaces, Geekshire. Yeah, say it with me, Geekshire. Enter that. You get money off your ticket, and you can join us and hang out and drink beer and have great food. And even if you don't drink beer, you can have incredible food and beverages and conversations with your favorite hosts here at Systematic Geekology. The Geek stage is growing. I'm proud of that, and we thank Trip for this opportunity. We hope to see you at Theology Beer Camp, the Return of the God Pods 2024.